Picture this, you're a regular citizen in 1985. You tell someone that if someone could make a 3D animation move around for more than an hour, you would love it so much. They can't imagine what that would be like. And then, a decade later, the first 3D animated movie comes out and you're blown away. Today, I'm going to be diving into Toy Story, or rather the making of the film, the stepping stone into the vast world of 3D animated films, the start of it all. John Lasseter, Andrew Stanton, and Peter Docter started working and scrapping ideas for Toy Story after the constant rejection from Disney, who wanted the film's tone to be edgier. The production ended up being halted, thus causing the whole script to be rewritten to fit what the studio had envisioned. Toys deeply want children to play with them, and this desire drives their hopes, fears, and actions. John Lasseter had begun computer animation work at Walt Disney Feature Animation. When two of his friends showed him the light-cycled scene to Tron, he pitched that the brave little toaster should be done completely with computer animation, which would make it the first full movie to be animated completely with computer animation. However, Disney rejected his idea and he was fired. Afterwards, he began to work at Lucasfilm, becoming a founding member of what would later be called Pixar. Apple Inc. co-founder Steve Jobs then purchased Pixar, and John Lasseter, along with the small team at Pixar, would create short computer animated films. Later in 1988, John would produce an animated short titled Tin Toy, which would win the 1989 Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film, which was the first computer animated film to do so. Disney's attention was turned to Tin Toy, and they wanted to get John Lasseter back, but after he came out and said this, "I can go to Disney and be a director, or I can stay here and make history." Disney knew they wouldn't be able to lure him back. So, they decided on something else. They set a plan to get Pixar to ink a production deal that would allow them to make a film under them. Usually, Disney only let their films be made in-house. However, when Tim Burton wanted to buy the rights back to The Nightmare Before Christmas, they struck a deal and let him make it a film outside the Disney studio. That would allow Pixar to make their movies outside of Disney. The two companies had beef on key points as to whether or not Disney would get the rights to Pixar's animation technology, or if Pixar would retain the partial ownership to their characters' films and home video and sequel rights. Considering Pixar was nearing bankruptcy and desperate for funds, they settled a deal that Disney would get complete ownership and control of the films and characters, including the rights to make sequels without Pixar's involvement, while Pixar would get a 12.5% of ticket sales. An agreement to produce a feature film based on Tin Toy with a working title, Toy Story, was finalized and production began soon thereafter. Originally, the main character of Toy Story was going to be Tinny, the tin toy from the short Pixar produced, along with the character called the Dummy. The original plot would follow Tinny getting left at a gas station, meeting up with the Dummy, and both of them going on a line of adventures trying to find their way to a kindergarten classroom so they could be played with every day. The chairman of Disney at the time was unhappy with this version as he felt the two main characters' motivations were too similar, and he proposed that they write it as a buddy film, give the characters contrasting personalities and motivations, and having them become friends only when they're forced to work together. After revising the script a bit more, in September of 1991, the story was now one that closely resembles the final version of the film. Tinny replaces the ventriloquist dummy as a child's favorite toy. Their bickering causes them to be left behind at a gas station. They almost catch up to the family at a pizza restaurant. They have to escape a kid who mutilates toys, and the movie ends with a chase scene as the two toys try to catch up to the family's moving van. Later, the character of Tinny was scrapped and replaced by more of a G.I. Joe type of toy that was given a space theme. He was first called Lunar Larry, then Tempest from Morph, eventually landing on the name Buzz Lightyear, named after Buzz Aldrin. Buzz's suit ended up green and purple, inspired by John Lasseter's wife's favorite colors. Woody was inspired by John Lasseter's Casper the Friendly Ghost toy when he was younger. At first, he was a ventriloquist dummy with a pull string, hence the name Woody. Character designer Bud Luckey suggested to make him a cowboy, inspired the aspect of his design. Later on, the ventriloquist aspects of Woody's design would ultimately be scrapped because he would look too sneaky and mean, and that's not what he was intended to portray. However, they kept the name Woody as an homage to the Western actor Woody Strode. Since the Toy Story writers had little to no experience in the feature films, they attended a seminar given by screenwriter Robert McKee. While there, they learned that it would be more powerful storytelling if the main character of story should be defined by how they react to the obstacles they face, and that it is the obstacles that make the character more interesting. The character Rex was added, and they tried to make a character that would fill the Barbie role, later being Bo Peep, as they weren't licensed to use Barbie from Mattel. But apparently something happened when they made Toy Story 2 because there were Barbies in that movie. I don't know. Maybe Mattel realized that it would be great marketing or something. I don't know. They also revisioned Buzz Lightyear from being dim-witted to cheerful and self-aware character to being an action figure who isn't aware he's a toy. An epiphany that transformed the film. A brainstorming session with the members of Disney Animation's creative team resulted in the addition of the three-eyed toy aliens as well. In 1993, the script to Toy Story was approved, which meant it was time to start casting people to play the characters. Paul Newman, who later voiced Doc Hudson in the film Cars, was considered for the role of Woody. Also, Robin Williams and Clint Eastwood were also considered, but one person John Lasseter was dead set on being the voice of Woody was Tom Hanks. He had used a common Disney technique to figure this out, where he'd animated the character with an actor's voice, reel, or monologue, with actions that fit the tone of the actor and such. This gauges how well a certain voice actor would fit into a role, and he had found that with Woody and Tom Hanks' voice.
Oh, no, you're eating the car! Don't eat the car! Not the car!
As for Buzz Lightyear, Billy Crystal was approached to voice him. However, he turned the role down, thinking the film would be unsuccessful given its animation. Upon regretting his decision after seeing what a big hit Toy Story was, reaching number 2 in the highest-grossing films of 1995, he accepted the role of Mike Wazowski in Monsters, Inc. Other people who were considered for the role of Buzz were Bill Murray, Chevy Chase, Jim Carrey, Jason Alexander, Dan Aykroyd, Matthew Broderick, Kevin Costner, Michael J. Fox, Richard Gere, David Hasselhoff, Michael Keaton, Wayne Knight, Bill Paxton, Dennis Quaid, Russell Crowe, Kurt Russell, that's an inside joke, Adam Sandler, and John Travolta. Ultimately, John Lasseter took the role to Tim Allen, who was appearing in Disney's Home Improvement, and he accepted. Before Wallace Shawn and Jim Varney were cast as Rex and Sleeky, Rick Moranis and John Cleese were originally considered for the roles. When Pixar was looking for a voice actor for Andy, they set out a casting call for young male actors to bring a toy with them to the audition. John Morris, who ended up playing Andy, brought multiple toys, despite the directions for everyone to bring just one. Specifically, he brought 45 X-Men figures, and the team at Pixar responded with laughter. Tom Hanks and Tim Allen's first animated movie was Toy Story, and to make the dialogue even more immersive and their actions more realistic, they recorded their lines together. Because Disney was kind of controlling the direction Toy Story was taking, at first, they lost a lot of the vision John Lasseter had for this movie. They realized that the character of Woody, especially, had been made into a real jerk. Pixar screened the first half of the film for Disney executives on November 19, 1993. The event would later be referred to as the Black Friday Incident. John Lasseter was embarrassed by the current state of the film, recalling that it was a story filled with the most unhappy, mean characters I've ever seen. While the head writers worked on revising and working on a new script, the production crew shifted to television commercials until it'd be done and they could resume work on the film. All this while Steve Jobs personally funded it while Disney resumed production. After 3 months, Pixar's rewrites to Toy Story were done, Woody going from tyrant to wise leader and Buzz's personality being more clear that he genuinely didn't know he was a toy. In February 1994, Disney resumed production and voice actors returned 1 month later to record their new lines. The crew grew from 24 people to 110, now included 27 animators and 22 technical directors. In comparison, The Lion King, released in 1994, required a staff of 800. Steve Jobs was eager to produce a film as efficiently as possible, impressing Katzenberg with his focus of cost cutting. The 17 million budget was no longer going to be sufficient, and Steve Jobs requested more funds to compensate them for the time lost and rewrites, per Disney's notes. They were able to reach a compromise on a new budget, and the incident led Steve to rethink their deal with Disney. The appeal when recruiting new animators for this film was not the mediocre pay, but instead the opportunity to be part of the making of the first computer animated full feature film. To make Toy Story truly beautiful and show the potential of making more films like this, John Lasseter said that the rewarding challenges that came with computer animation are that we had to make things look more organic. Every leaf and blade of grass had to be created. We had to give this world a sense of history, so the doors are banged up and the floors have scuffs. 27 animators worked on the film, using 400 computer models to animate the characters. Each character was first either created out of clay or modeled from a computer-drawn diagram before reaching the computer animated design. John Lasseter wanted to impress Disney, to show them what 3D animation could do over traditional 2D animation, like Woody's yellow plaid shirt with red stripes, and the reflections in Buzz's helmet and the decals on his spacesuit. Because in traditional animation, animators have to tend to keep designs simple, as they have to draw every single frame, and they have to keep it consistent and all that. With this new 3D animation, however, there's more of an opportunity to give even more complex designs with more detail. The articulation and motions controls of the models of the characters were coded. This allowed each character to move in a variety of ways, such as talking, walking, and jumping. Out of all the characters, the most complex was Woody, as he required 723 motion controls, including 212 on his face and 58 for his mouth. The 8 teams that were responsible for the different aspects of all the shots were the art department, responsible for determining the overall color and lighting scheme. The layout department was responsible for determining the position of all the elements of the shot as well as programming the virtual camera's position and movement. The animation department, which created the movements of the characters, generally with one animation being assigned to animate an entire shot, but occasionally with each character having its own animator. The shading team used Pixar's RenderMan software to assign surface textures and reflectivity properties to objects. The lighting team placed global spot and flood lighting within the scenes. The render farm used Sun Microsystems computers to produce the final frames of the film. The camera team recorded the finished frames, which had been rendered at a resolution of 1536 by 922 onto film stock, and finally Skywalker Sword, the sound and music division of Lucasfilm, mixed sound effects, the musical score, and the dialogue to create audio for the film. Pixar wanted to make this film feel as realistic as possible, ergo making the virtual cameras in the software feel like real cameras, as if they were filming live action. The layout department, led by Craig Good, avoided what was popular in computer animation at the time, which was the sweeping camera shots. Instead, the team focused on what would have been popular in live action film, giving it a more realistic feeling. The animation department, led by Rich Quaid and Ash Brannon, posed the characters at keyframes with reference to videotapes of the voice actors recording their lines, making them feel more organic. For every 8 seconds of the film, they spent a week on the characters' facial expressions and mouths. John Lasseter felt that automatic lip syncing would not properly convey a character's emotions. The shading team, led by Tom Porter, used scans of real objects as well as textures drawn by artists and created a procedural generation algorithms to dress the objects in the film. The film ultimately required a 800,000 machine hours, and 240 frames of animation in total, divided between 1,561 shots that totaled over 77 minutes. Pixar was able to render less than 30 seconds of the film per day. John Lasseter didn't want Toy Story to be a musical. As a buddy movie, where the two main characters won't admit what they want, much less sing about it, it would feel less genuine if it were a musical. Considering Disney's track record, of course, they wanted to make it a musical, so they heavily encouraged Pixar to do the same. As a compromise, they agreed to involve non-diegetic songs as background music, so none of the characters would be singing. In fact, I think the only musical Pixar movie to date now is Coco, really, where there's multiple songs that the main characters sing, but other than that, I think that's the only one. Disney did sort of get that in Toy Story 2, though it's only one song about Jesse's backstory, and technically the voice actor doesn't actually sing it. I guess it's coming from Jesse, but someone else sang it as well. And I didn't even know this, but apparently in 2012 there was a musical based off of Toy Story and apparently, and obviously, the main characters would be singing, so I guess it happened after all. Disney got their way. To make the music, aside from the score, Randy Newman was hired to do so. He composed 3 original songs for the film, You Got a Friend in Me being the film's signature, the other 2 being Strange Things and I Will Go Sailing No More. There were also a few seconds where we see the front seat of the car and Andy and Molly's mom and Molly listening to Hakuna Matata. John Lasseter was 100% on board with Randy Newman's song for the film, saying, his songs are touching, witty, and satirical, and he would deliver the emotional underpinning for every scene. Lee Unkrich, one of the editors of the film, suggested many changes leading up to the deadline in September of 1995 to deliver the final cut for scoring and sound design. One of these changes was a scene where Sid would be torturing Woody and Buzz violently at his house, but instead was replaced with Sid interrogating Woody because the film's creators thought that the audience would have grown to love both Woody and Buzz by that point in the film. Another scene in which the final version is Woody trying to get Buzz's attention when he was stuck underneath a box crate was shortened due to the creators' fear that it would lose the momentum, pacing, and energy of the film. Michael Eisner, who attended the screening, recommended that the final shot of the film should be Woody and Buzz leading the film's final shot of the two worried about the arrival of Andy's new puppy. Crew members found it difficult to analyze whether the film was going to be quality because of the footage being scattered into pieces as it was being worked on. Some of the animators felt that the film would be a significant disappointment commercially, but also felt animators and animation fans would find it interesting. Steve Jobs suspectedly lacked confidence in the film during its production and had been exploring the possibility of selling Pixar to companies such as Hallmark Cards, and Microsoft. Wait, Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple, thinking of selling something to Microsoft. That's kind of funny to me. Anyways, however, as the film progressed, Steve Jobs became increasingly more passionate about it and the transformative nature of what Pixar might be able to accomplish in the future. Steve Jobs decided he'd schedule an initial public offering, an IPO, of Pixar just a week after the film's November release, as he was eager and optimistic about the impact the finished film would have. For Pixar to have the funds necessary to negotiate with Disney as an equal partner. Disney held their premiere of Toy Story at El Capitan Theater in Los Angeles on November 19, 1995, and Pixar held their premiere of their film the following night at the Regency Center in San Francisco. According to David Price's book, The Pixar Touch, the film deeply resonated with both children and adults. Internationally, some theatrical releases of the film were preceded by a re-release of the Roger Rabbit short, Roller Coaster Rabbit. Disney spent $20 million in marketing for Toy Story, as well as advertisers such as Burger King, PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, and Payless Shoe Source paying $125 million in promotions for the film. Now, the most obvious form of advertising for a movie about characters who our toys would be to make them toys, correct? Despite Disney consumer products being so slow to see the potential of Toy Story, after the release of the film, many toy companies were accustomed to having 18 months to 2 years of lead time and passed on the project. So it was on to another option. Disney shopped the film at the Toy Fair Parade show in February of 1995, where only the small Canadian company Thinkway Toys was interested in licensing the toy rights for Toy Story characters. Few more fun facts. So, Barbie wasn't allowed to be in the first Toy Story film because Mattel didn't license it for that. Um, and again, apparently they changed their mind later when the sequels came. And they were also denied to use the G.I. Joes, possibly because it would have been the toy Sid blew up in the backyard. So instead, Pixar created a fictional toy brand, Combat Carl, to be the one that Sid blew up in his backyard. But they did manage to license Mr. Potato Head for the film. Slinky Dog was the only toy that was licensed that had already been created, wasn't a fictional toy. It was the only toy like that to have not been in production at the time of the film, having discontinued since the 1970s. The designs they used for him were sent to Betty James, the Slinky inventor, Richard James's wife, and she said that Pixar had improved the toy and that it was cuter than the original toy.